Howdy folks, we're at Edge number 3 already, December 1993. Still the future of video gaming. And I love this cover. Look, graphics to die for. Indeed, this is Rise of the Robots, one of the greatest flops of all time. And Edge says, "Who cares about the gameplay when it looks this good? Edge does." And most people also thought the same. Let's check out the bottom left corner. What are they talking about? Rise of the Robots from Mirage, a graphically outstanding fast action beat 'em up. Each body part was modeled in 3D Studio and is stored as independent sprites. That's not true. The limbs are linked and animated to give life to each 3D mechanoid. Well, maybe the sprites are true in the workstation, but as a game, it was just one sprite. So, let's take a look into the third Edge magazine. And the traditional black page on the inside. And the Edge view, where the editor talks about the current state of the industry, discusses how graphics will have to be rendered in real time in order to advance computer games. At the time, we had a lot of games using the kind of technology we've seen in Resident Evil 1 and Final Fantasy 7, where you had these backgrounds which were just flat. And at the time, that was the best thing you could do to look 3D. But as Resident Evil 4 and Final Fantasy 10, yeah, they went full 3D eventually. The contents, we have the 3DO, which is getting a big article this time. One second. Yeah. Rise of the Robots, as promised on the cover. Virtual reality. Sure. Let's look at some dragons and reviews. Anything else interesting? The Supergun, yeah, the arcade at home. And Core Design, that British company who made Thunderhawk and Chuck Rock. What are they up to? Well, they weren't up to Tomb Raider back then. So, the 3DO arrives, and not that many promising games so far. But hey, it was the future. It used CDs. It had MPEG. It had Trip Hawkins, right? The golden boy of the video game industry in the early 90s. Excuse me. So, yeah, a little bit of article about how well photos could be viewed on the 3DO. And I think the next page is about what it's like to play music CDs on the 3DO. Just like the PlayStation 1, you get a kind of a funky video. I don't know the game in attract mode. Which game is this? Oh, it's Kether. Yeah, we'll be discussing that later. Yeah, Kether. Another bland shoot 'em up in a 3D environment, which is actually just 2D. It says here, PCs join the FMV race. Yep, once upon a time, PCs didn't do everything. You actually had to get, sound blasters and 3D cards and other extensions like CD-ROMs. So, yeah, the PC was actually competing with consoles to do the same things. Jaguar is getting ready again. It's like the third month in a row that we hear about the Jaguar getting ready. Let's see, some virtual reality at a leisure show. That sounds a bit tacky. I looked at this and I wondered, does anybody know who this Iron Man is of NEC? Some kind of 32-bit system? I feel like I should know, but don't know. And yeah, Nintendo backs out a CD-ROM. Why? Well, probably because they thought they could make more money licensing cartridges. But yeah, PlayStation games would be cheaper, and companies would make more money out of using CD. And let's just be honest, PlayStation got a huge player base because people would be copying CDs and letting them to friends. a PlayStation was a very good deal because a lot of the games were free for some people. So you have the charts. Mortal Kombat has been released and tops both the Super Nintendo and the Mega Drive charts. In Japan, we have Tornaco's Great Adventure. Now, is that Final Fantasy? Is that? No, I don't know which game that is. I should look that up. Yeah, Night Trap is still #1 at the Mega CD, so that's 3 months in a row. Must be a good game. And I like this part. I should have checked it out last month. But these are the games the readers were most interested in. We have Total Eclipse at #1. Do you remember that game? Well, we'll see it later on. Power Slide for the Super Nintendo was the previous version of Stunt Race FX, if I'm correct. Forgotten Castle was never released, but it looked like a medieval Doom. Virtual Racing, you know. And Crescent Galaxy, some kind of side-scrolling shooter for the Jaguar. Not at all interesting if you ask me, but apparently people are interested in that. You know, no mention of fantastic games released around the area, like Super Metroid. I don't know. So yeah, there's Secret of Mana and SimCity 2000. So that's 2 classics already. This is Alone in the Dark 2. Might be considered a classic by some people. But first, Total Eclipse. Another game kind of like Chaos Control, where you fly around and shoot things. I think, yeah, you do have the freedom to go your own way. That's what I think people are interested in, is because you actually have the freedom to fly around in different directions. But other than that, it was just a completely bland game. And here's Kether. This one is on rails, and I think it's for the CDI. And it's kind of, it says here, a cross between Silpede and Dungeon Master with lots of shiny metal. Can you imagine that? I tried to find some reviews. They're all around the 70s and 80s, except the Dutch publication. They gave it a 92, Power Unlimited. Philips is a Dutch company, so maybe that's why they gave such a high score. I should look into it more later. We have Secret of Mana, the best non-Final Fantasy game Square has ever made, I think. Maybe Chrono Trigger. And yeah, never bested in the series. And yeah, the 3-player option is indeed awesome. It's just a wonderful game. I don't think Edge ever reviewed it though. I'm getting confused with Second Niketsu 3. Alone in the Dark 2. I hope you know this series because this inspired Resident Evil. This is really the beginning of the survival horror games as we know them. Capcom had this other game for the Super Nintendo, which I would also call survival horror, but I can't remember the name. But this is so much like Resident Evil, and it has 3D graphics with like low polygon count graphics on 2D backgrounds that look 3D, and had some fights. Frontier Elite 2, the sequel to probably the greatest game made before Super Mario Brothers. But if you didn't live in England, you probably don't know it very well. Elite lets you, well, what do you call it? Space trucking? Yeah, you get to fly around and trade and fight and level up and become elite, a legend in the star systems. And part 2 adds color and 3D graphics, and it's pretty good. Macro Scramble Valkyrie on the right is probably the best shooter for the Super Nintendo, if it's not Space Megaforce. So yeah, if you like shooting things, check it out. You get to choose your own character. Rebel Assault. I don't remember this game very well. There were some pretty good Star Wars games for the PC back in the day, but this was not one of them, I think. We have Lawnmower Man for the PC. Was this ever released? I don't know. I can't be bothered. I mean, really. Lawnmower Man. Now, here's a game not trying to impress with 3D visuals, and it's probably the biggest game in this issue. Good old SimCity 2000. I still prefer the Super Nintendo version, but this is otherwise the best version of SimCity. Seawolf, I don't know that game. Subwars 2050, same. Here we have Frontier Elite 2, so big in England, you have no idea. Okay, so Pyramid Patrol, a game made for the Laser Active Mega LD. Yeah, LD stands for Laserdisc, and yes, they still had Laserdisc players in Japan in 1993. And this was a game for it. And again, a game with 3D graphics in the background and you shooting at things. Super Darius 2. And some of the first 3DO games. That looks like Need for Speed, doesn't it? It's called Road Race. Yeah, so hard to tell which games these are exactly. Yeah, Road Rash, I notice. Jurassic Park. Manga. An Acorn computer. Very British again. Release dates. And look at those graphics. The Rise of the Robots. Released for almost every system. Maybe for the Game Boy too? I don't remember. So yeah, the thing was they had these robots and they looked all really nice. And the funny thing is that they also, at the time, I remember them always selling the AI. It's not a conventional beat 'em up. We're using a lot of artificial intelligence. We'll definitely have one over on Street Fighter 2. No, they didn't. Actually, Street Fighter 2 is pretty sophisticated AI. I played a lot in the arcades against, the computer while waiting for opponents. And yeah, the AI learned. They weren't just sticking to the same algorithm the whole time. And Rise of the Robots actually has pretty interesting AI, but it's a slow learner. It takes its time to actually adapt to you. And I think it's more sophisticated Street Fighter 2, but in practice, it's just dull. Nevertheless, your character only has like 5 moves. So what's the point, right? You only get to play as one robot who has 2 punches, 2 kicks on the ground, and a jumping attack, if I recall correctly. So yeah, not much depth. More fancy pictures. I don't know if you could read this, but in this part they talk about how, this is what we have on our workstations, but you're going to have to lose the shadows on the PC. And the finished product didn't look that nice. Intel advertising their powerful chips. And VR, the next step. Well, I don't know. I mean, I love this picture. I see it all the time. Look at her hair. And, oh, these were all flops. I think the bottom right one kind of got some action in the arcades, but nah. I would love to have one of these authentic helmets. I worked in a video game store, and I think it was in 2004, people came in, these young kids, they came into the store, well, kids, they were like 20, and they're like, yeah, do you have like one of those virtual reality things we could use? And I was like, what do you mean? And like, yeah, I remember seeing them all around. They're pretty cheap now by now, right? I was amazed that these students, they apparently the marketing got to them, but they never saw them in real life, and they actually thought I would have them in my video game store. What I would love to have is a virtual reality helm. Look at that. That's so rad. So here's some screenshots of games, virtual reality. I don't trust these images, to be honest. And then let's finish up with this, the part 1 with this commercial. Nintendo was being aware that they were less cool than Sega, so they made these edgy commercials. Look at this. You buy a Street Fighter 2, and you're going to need a lot of underwear because, well, I'll let you fill in the blanks. But, yeah. Look, it's kind of like on a Macintosh computer. So who are they selling this game to? People who have a Mac who are considering buying a Super Nintendo for Street Fighter 2 Turbo only? Because look at these prices here. Console with game around £140. Okay, I gotta go. See you in part 2.